Here we are again with our last time online for the double feature lecture series as part of Living the City. This is the last time of the year, maybe the last time of this exhibition. We don't know yet, but I'm thrilled to be here with two great guests. Living the City is an exhibition and a publication and a program of events about cities, people, and stories. My name is Lucas Feireis. I'm the co-creator of the exhibition alongside with Tatjana Schneider and the Green Isle. A warm welcome to all of you and thank you for being here. The players have changed again. The rules of the game remain the same. Two speakers, each 15 to 20 minutes, question and answers, in all no longer than 60 minutes. Tonight we have Berlin-based artist, activist, and researcher Diana Arce with us, and Berlin-based artist Nasan Tur. I think the common denominator for tonight's presentation appears to be, maybe amongst many other things we'll figure out, about artistic practices that are deeply embedded in society and the contemporary social-political context and discourses. But let's see. But this is the feeling that I'm getting from kind of researching upon both of you. That said, I'm looking forward to the talks, and then I would like to start with you, Diana, introducing you. Diana Arce. We haven't met before this exhibition. We got in touch during the making of the exhibition. Actually, tonight we were supposed to have an event in the exhibition, which is obviously not possible. And we've come across your work during the research for Living the City. Tatjana Schneider made me aware of your work, in particular for Artists Without a Cause. And we started a conversation while you were still in the US. You just returned to Berlin. You are a multimedia artist, an activist and a researcher, as I said before, with a special focus on intersectional anti-racist practices. In your vita, you described that you're pursuing your love for social sciences through your often participatory and community-engaged artistic practice. You do this in many different ways, through teaching and lecturing, or doing workshops, creating campaigns, and also co-hosting a monthly radio show called Like It Is on Reboot FM. One of your other projects that's ongoing is White Guilt Cleanup, which dismantles like white privilege and white supremacy. You're providing online and offline services. You are also the director and founder of Artists Without a Cause. It's a nonprofit supporting and researching arts and activism. And this is how we got in touch. You are the creator and founder of Politaoke, which is a like non-partisan political speech karaoke bar. So imagine a karaoke, but you're not singing Tina Turner, but you're actually reciting political speeches. And this is what we were supposed to do in the exhibition tonight. Anyways, Thank you so much for being with us, and the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks. It's so sad that we're in the middle of a pandemic that we could not do the show today. But I'm going to show a little bit about what that's like so we can have a taste, and hopefully if the exhibition gets expanded, then we can do a show in 2021. So, which would be very exciting because I don't know how many other people are, but I am very excited about, it's every time there's an election, there's a lot of fever around everything going on and around this project. And 2020 was a big one for the US, and 2021 is going to be a big one for Germany. So that's very, very exciting for me. Thank you also for mentioning my radio show. We will be on the air doing a yearly roundup on Saturday at 6 p.m. Berlin time on reboot.fm. So we're really excited about that. We're actually going to be recording that tomorrow. So let me just turn on my screen sharing. Here we go. And there we go. So thanks for the introduction. I'm Diana Arce. I've been living in Berlin for 16 years now. And as you mentioned, my artistic practice sort of intersects, it's social sciences intersecting with art, but primarily focused on politics, anti-racism, and sort of community building and activism. So that's sort of the realm that I'm working in. And I want to show one of the early pieces of mine that kind of Well, the first piece I originally wanted to show is from really old. It's from 2002. But you know, video wasn't as good back then. So I was pulling up old footage and it just wasn't really looking that great. So I decided to fast forward to a little bit later to kind of show some of more of my, where I started from before I started moving into the realm of very like working directly in participation with the audience. So this is the first piece and it's called Corporate Practice Junior Executive Training. Yeah, so this piece, was actually a, can you hear me? Okay, great. This piece was, it happened, it was in 2004, and this was right when one of the early 2000 financial crises happened. This was when Enron went bankrupt and WorldCom went bankrupt. And there were all these reports that were coming out about what their offices looked like when they were raided by the IRS and the FBI. And when the IRS and the FBI went into some of these spaces, they found nothing but shredded paper. They were trying to sort of dump all their documents. And so, you know, for me, it's really, really important to sort of to think about how to make invisible things visible to the public. And so on 42nd Street, around the corner from the old Enron headquarters and WorldCom headquarters, between Grand Central Station and the United Nations building, for 6 days, every day during working hours, we shredded paper until we filled this entire space. Yeah, so that was just something I wanted to show to sort of give people a bit of an idea of the kind of, you know, I'm interested in working with humor. I have a lot of, you know, so it's political, but it's also about being tongue in cheek or finding a way to make things a little more palatable, horrible things kind of palatable for people to be able to really think about like why these things are an issue. And so the two pieces I'm going to talk about today are Politaoke, what I was originally invited for, and also a little bit about white guilt cleanup. I first started Politaoke in 2007 in Weimar in Germany. And then in 2008, I took it on a tour of the United States. And how I got to this idea of turning political speeches into karaoke was because there were a lot of sort of weird things happening in the democratic process, like worldwide, but particularly in the United States. In 2003, in the California gubernatorial election, there was a recall election for the governor's seat of California. This is the election that Arnold Schwarzenegger won. And if you look on the slide, you can see that those are all the candidates. That's every single person running for governor of California for the recall. It was an extremely large ballot. And at this time, you know, I was watching the news. I was living in California at the time. And one of the things that I heard on television was a newscaster say that Hollywood, politics is Hollywood for ugly people. And you know, and I also found it to be a very interesting situation in which like anyone felt that they could run. And why is it that more people are not actually running for office? Now, when we look at how people run for office, there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of teams involved. Even in the United States, they go so far as having, you know, stylists who tell people how much dirt they should have on their shoes, you know, which ties to wear. There's all these things that come into play. And to be able to sort of recreate those things and make those things accessible is pretty complicated. At the same time, you have spaces like this. This is from 2000, I believe 2004, from the Democratic National Convention. And this is what they called a free speech zone. So when people would go to protest political parties or try to get their voices heard, they would corral them into spaces that were as far away from the politicians as possible. And so one of the things that the other side that I was interested in was finding a way to be able to cross into these spaces and also out of these spaces and to get closer to the politician. And to find a way of protest in which no one could really say is a form of protest. So I took it upon myself in 2008 to tour across the United States during the first Obama election. That was Obama versus John McCain. That's when Sarah Palin happened. And I did for lack of a better term, a whistle stop tour where I did 24 shows in 60 days, traveling across the entire country in a figure 8, and kind of following the politicians. I was both at the Republican National Convention and at the Democrat National Convention that happened that year. And yeah, so you know, I came across these kinds of spaces, and what was very interesting was that because I was traveling with just karaoke gear, every time I would come up to one of these sort of like control stops where they were deciding who to let in whatever city or not, they would open up my car, they would search through everything, and they would just say, oh, like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I have a karaoke gig, and they would let me through. So the Republican National Convention was held in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota. Those are two cities they're called the Twin Cities. They're next to each other. And the convention center was in St. Paul, and they did not let protesters into St. Paul. I was the only person who wasn't from the convention or surrounding the convention who could enter St. Paul at the time. Another inspiration for this project is also Speaker's Corner in London. I'm pretty sure everyone is very familiar with that. It's this park in London where people stand up on soapboxes and just talk and wait for an audience. So in this process of sort of deciding and looking at what are the things that politicians have that I can sort of transfer over to people, the main one was, okay, I can actually I can give people the speeches. I can give people the actual language that the politicians use, and give them the space to be able to reinterpret them in the way that they'd want. So that's basically what I did. So these are just a few images of some of the projects. This is a show that happened in Jerusalem and Israel in 2012. These shows are very, very interesting because we not only did Israeli speeches, but also Palestinian speeches in public spaces across Jerusalem for 3 days. And we included from the right to the left and everyone in between, and always made sure to have speeches from all the potential oppositions of, you know, everyone involved. So this is just an image of that. And then this is an image of another show that happened in Jerusalem. This is a young Palestinian man who came to my show. And if you look on the back of the screen, you can see that there's two colors. So if there's two politicians debating, you can have two politicians debating. But in addition to transcribing all of what a politician says, we also transcribe everything else that we find on the audio. So in this case, the green changing to white is the audience shouting on the audio recording. Another thing to note with this is that there are no actual, it's very, very rare to find proofed transcripts for any political speech in any culture. The Bundestag edits their transcripts that they post online into Hochdeutsch to make them more palatable. But when you listen to the recording, they're actually very, very different. Now, journalists, they don't have the time to go and listen to all the recordings and make sure that they're writing the quote perfectly. So they mostly write from the transcripts. And one of the things that I find is that this also makes the politicians a bit more human. So what we end up having is we have, you know, people speaking in dialects, people using slang. There's all sorts of different things that pop up within it. And so all of this stuff is available on the karaoke videos that I build. You can see all of this. A little anecdote about the shows in Jerusalem. The first day, the third speech, we had a speech that we put in our program that was a really rough speech. And in the speech in Arabic, the politician screams, "Kill Israel." And the audience screams, "Kill Israel" back. And so this person asked to do that speech and we're like, okay, we're just gonna let it happen because we don't know if this is gonna go over well. I didn't realize either while I was there that everybody pretty much in Jerusalem speaks both Hebrew and Arabic. I thought we could maybe get away with some stuff because only half the audience would understand. And this gentleman got up on stage, he starts giving the speech, and he had, you know, he like embodied this very, very strong persona that got everyone very excited about him. And it ended up showing the audience how easily we can get caught up in political rhetoric when we look at our politicians as these stars, as opposed to really listening to what they're saying. So when he screams this in the speech, the audience started shouting it back before they realized what they were saying. So if you can imagine, like, people saying, like him saying it, and then the audience is supposed to say it, the audience, it sounded like this: "Kill Israel." Oh, and everyone all of a sudden understood that there's something really, really important about separating the person from the politics when we look at our politicians, and really paying close attention to what they're saying, and not, you know, the buzzwords and the rhetoric, but really about the words that they say that maybe don't land on TV, for example. Another thing that was very interesting about the shows in the United States, this is actually in Minneapolis, so it's good for all ages. One of the interesting things about the show in the United States too was that in that election, John McCain was not particularly known for being a great orator. He did not deliver a great speech. He had really great speeches written for him, but he couldn't really compete with Obama, right? The way that Obama was able to sort of master language. And in one of the shows, we had people were picking speeches for other people and guessing the politician. And someone selected a speech that was from John McCain and delivered it and someone else delivered it, and they were swearing up and down that it was from Obama. But in the end, you know, we had to explain, I had to actually pull up the clip of the video and show him that this is not Obama, this is John McCain's speech. And, you know, if we look at how that election turned out, how much importance is placed on how you embody language as opposed to the actual words that are being saying. Two people can be saying the exact same thing, but it's going to be read completely different based off of who's doing it. So that was another very interesting thing I learned in the project. This is in Dortmund. We did all the Dortmunder politicians with Pain Collective in, I think this was 2014. And then this is in 2014 at the Berliner Festspiele part. And this was part of the this was when, these are all speeches from when Angela Merkel when they realized that Angela Merkel's phone was getting tapped by the NSA. So perfectly enough, there's this young gentleman here is giving a speech from Strobele, who's one of our favorite former politicians here in Berlin, in Kreuzberg. He used to be my representative, who always wore the red scarf. He happened to be wearing a red sweater. And this is him giving a speech about, you know, about her phone getting tapped. This is a small clip from a show in Austria.
Politaoke, man geht seine Rede auf. Man stellt sie auf die Bühne und halt das Leben. Du kannst einen Politiker nehmen, das du liebst, du kannst einen Politiker nehmen, das du hast, du kannst einen Politiker nehmen, das dir scheißegal ist. I had a series of discussions on important subjects, starting with a dinner we had last night. Das bedeutet natürlich, dass der Hauptbahnhof im Süden noch näher an Bayern heran.
Can you not hear?
The deep cuts and the government spending and returning power to the people. That we are.
Were you able to hear that at all, or it's super loud for me? So yeah, so one of the things also that's sort of important with this is that, you know, the person who is giving the speech has a little screen where they read it, but the audience can also see the transcription that we put together of the speech behind them, so they can participate along. Or if the person who's giving the speech decides that they want to change it up or change the words, you still have access to the original language. The next thing I'm going to talk about before my time is up is white guilt cleanup. I started white guilt cleanup in 2015, and it basically came out of sort of, you know, plenty of personal experiences of being asked to persistently represent the Black community in all sorts of scenarios. So whether that was professionally or, you know, publicly, or, you know, even people asking me questions in a bar, and then people, you know, and then at the same time when that would happen, I would give information, and then I would be immediately told that the information that I would be giving is incorrect. Now, mind you, I'm not only coming from this from an anecdotal level, but I also have a degree in cultural studies where I focused on, you know, on issues relating to race, you know, not only in the United States, but in Germany. So, you know, I also have I have the certificates, I guess, to allow me to be a person to speak about these things. And so one of the things I came up with was to develop a space in which anyone who'd be interested in understanding any of these things could come to us, like, you know, and ask for a consultation. If a group was working on a project, or if an organization would get in trouble with a marginalized community, they could approach us and we could tell them how to repair the situation. It started out with a business card with an email address on it, and the email address is sorry@whiteguiltcleanup.com. And so whenever people would start asking me these questions, I would just hand them these cards. And so what I'm showing you here, I got invited to produce some pieces for a magazine called La Misión. And so I decided to make advertisement for this magazine, and sort of announcing the services and showing people and giving people some examples of some of the things we can do. So this is just sort of like a tongue-in-cheek project, cleaning up privilege one white person at a time. And then there is, hold on. Yeah. Then there's also a white guilt offset credit. So if someone has done something, if someone has, made a mistake, and that can be anything from using language that they're not supposed to use anymore, or one that's very popular among Black women with hair like mine, touching someone's hair without their permission. You can meet with us and discuss about how you feel bad about this and how you're not going to do it again. And then the fee for this is based off of whatever the situation was. And this only grants you immunity for the one event. So this is not till the end of time I can, use the N-word or touch Black people's hair or, say or do inappropriate things. And so it's this really beautiful certificate that you can buy. It's printed on linen. And then this is another part of the advertorial, which is sort of a future project that I'm trying to work on that has been postponed since COVID. So as part of La Mission, I wrote an advertorial about a fictional white woman who went to white guilt conversion camp. And in this camp learned all of these different methods and all these things of how to be a better person with privilege, and how to use their privilege properly, and how to make the steps to move from allyship into being an accomplice. Because one of the big words that has been thrown around for such a long time, and especially right now this year, is being an ally. And being an ally is, an ally is not enough. You want someone, when it comes to racial injustice and injustices and equity, you need someone who's an accomplice. You need someone who's willing to get into the shit with you. You need someone who's willing, for lack of a better term, to drive the getaway car. And so that's what this is about. And so this was placed in the La Mission magazine. And what ended up happening was that a lot of people actually ended up writing me and asking about the camp. So now this camp project is in development. So yeah, that's all I have to say about these projects. And yeah, and then those are some bunnies, because I like to have bunnies on the end of my slide. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hold on. Let's see.
So I'm looking at the time. I'm thinking a little bit, maybe that I would like to continue directly with Nasan and then ask questions to both of you, because I already see a lot of similarities, because in a certain way, both of your practices make invisible things visible, and both of you are somehow almost researching and then looking critically at like these social and political almost absurdities or something like that, that you kind of bring them into almost metaphorical images. And humor plays a big role in both of your work. So if that's okay, looking at the time, I would directly go to you, Nasan, and then we have a conversation in 3 at the end, yeah? So Nasan, I realized, and I think I told you this last time we met, came across your work 10 years ago. There was an exhibition at Tannas in Berlin. The show was called Tactics of Invisibility, and you had a piece called Berlin Says. And I was invited to join like a talk in the evening by Nico Anklam, was called the Tannas Talks. So this is how I got aware of your work. This is a decade ago. And then through our common friend, Roman Göbel, photographer, we kind of met again. Actually, you invited me to join your boxing training in Weißensee once. I skipped out after the first time, but it was great. So you also work in a very wide range of artistic practices that goes from sculpture to drawing and video and photography, a lot of performance pieces and installation. And they're very similar to, in the approach to Diana. You examine almost like a sociologist or researcher, like certain political social realities, and then you translate them into images or metaphorical images, artworks. They are always very powerful, very thought-provoking, and they work with humor. Again, a parallel that I see to Diana's work. I said many of the works are actually in the studio, but also beyond the studio, your practice often extends into the public space, actually the city streets. And in this context, you also, just since this semester, are the professor together with Bonaventure Ndikong, who was with us last week. You took over the professorship for spatial strategies. It's a master program at the Kunsthochschule Weißensee. So you were actually scheduled already, I think, 1.5 months ago to give your talk, but then you got sick. So now it was great to have you here for the final event. And yeah, thanks for being here. Your talk is entitled "When Civil Initiatives Take Over the Power of Mediations in Art." So the screen is yours, and I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you so much, Lucas, and thank you so much, Diana. It was great to see your work, and there are really similarities because I also worked in the past with the power of the rhetorics of political speeches and the composition of that, and also as a tool and a weapon, actually, the words, what people say. So it was very inspiring to see it. And today I just want to focus on one work, which is or still is a public space project. Let me check Bildschirm freigeben. I'm doing it now. And I'm starting. Wait a second. Where is it with the play? Can you see? I mean, it should be black now. Can you see it? Okay. So first of all, art in public space is so different. But one of the key things when we talk about statues also and monuments is also to functionalizing it in a political way. And it always depends actually also when, in which area, in which in which power has it at the moment of a state. So also the statues are changing. But sometimes there are also temporary projects. For example, this, as you see, that also as a political statement, actually, I think it was the Pegida movement here in Germany, which is a right-wing movement, made also an art in public space exhibition, let's say, in Dresden, where they built up, or artists built up, this Trojanisches Pferd, I don't know the English one, Trojan horse, as a symbol also that, you know, like this, that the foreigners who come and that they pretend like that they are in need, but at the end they will all kill us and come out from that horse. So they use this, and these are just some examples actually how also these statues and monuments work in different parts of the world. And also when, let's say, power structures are changing, that also some of these statues and monuments are also get broken or just erased from the city. So just as a little introduction for my project, what I've done in Göppingen, which is this little city in Germany. I was invited for an exhibition, a solo exhibition in the Kunsthalle there, what they had. But also the Kunstverein Göppingen, which they also invited me for do an art in public space project, but they do once the year, and it takes them 6 months. The artwork is in the public, so they invited me, and I was like going through the city and made some researches about the city, about the situation over there, about the structure. But randomly then I was in the city park. I just bumped into this sculpture. which is a 5.5 meters stone sculpture. I mean, like a really huge sculpture in the middle of also a kind of a street through the park inside of the city, which is very frequented. And obviously for me, from the appearance, it was from the aesthetics, like the kind of a Nazi sculpture. And when I asked some people there, then I figured out actually that it was really made in the 40s, this sculpture, and but is used now as a Mahnmal for the fallen soldiers of the Second World War who came from Göppingen, from that city. Yeah. But I found it very strange because it was more a kind of, how do you say, idealization of war and soldier, this sculpture. And then a very interesting story came up through that sculpture, which I found very fascinating, and then decided actually to work around that sculpture. Because actually, okay, I just explain very fast the story behind of that sculpture. This sculpture actually was made, or the nationalists, the politicians in 42, I think, no, I don't know, 42, 43, during the World War of the Second World War, they just ordered this statue from an artist to as a sculpture to celebrate the totale Sieg, the total victory of the Second World War. So they were so I mean, they were so sure about that they going win, that they made already that sculpture, and that sculpture they positioned on that place, and then they created it with a box, with a wooden box. And when they won the war, they wanted to make a huge celebration and open the box and for the public. That's the story behind of it. So they didn't won the war, and this sculpture exists in that place, inside of that wooden box, for more than 7 years, which is crazy. And I found it very crazy because it was a sculpture somehow invisible inside of the city, and also the alleys. I mean, the American troops, which came then to Göppingen. I think it was the Americans. They also destroyed sculptures and statues which had Nazi symbols on it, and this one actually, because they didn't make this Hitler sign on it, somehow they looked into it and then they closed it again because it was so they didn't identified it as a Nazi sculpture. So anyway, after 6 or 7 years, some people, it's not, I mean, nobody knows who it was, decided to save that sculpture as the total victory sculpture, and said, like, before something is happening, we should save this. So this sculpture disappeared from that place and was stored somewhere, but nobody knows where it was. And then 56, I think it was 56 or 54, forgot it. There was a new, I mean, there was a kind of a competition to make a monument for the fallen soldiers, actually, inside of the city. And one artist won that prize, and it was this sculpture. This sculpture won. It's a classical Pietà, where symbolically the soldier or the son actually died, and Maria, or the mother, is holding her son. And then it won, and they put it inside of that park. But actually, all these politicians actually didn't change. I mean, they were the same politicians who were during the Nazi time at the power. So actually, what happened then after this competition and this statue came there, the politicians said, actually, no, this is not worth for our fallen soldiers. This is too weak. This is not strong. This shows not strong soldiers, German soldiers. We have to get rid of it. And one of the politicians says, like, actually, hey, do you remember our total victory statue? Yeah, I remember. Why we shouldn't replace it with our old statue, actually, for the total victory. So we just make a Mahnmal for it. So, so they did transported this away, and instead of that, this total victory war statue came and became the Mahnmal. So this Nazi sculpture. What we have also to know is, when I saw this, I mean, it was really present somehow. I knew also, like, this aesthetics is very attractive to right people, and then it was true, which I knew there is a right movement, I mean, a neo-Nazi movement of Der Dritte Weg, I think they called it, which is active in that area, and they stand also with how do you say, Fackeln, fire, like Fackeln, yeah, in front of it, and celebrate some Nazi dates also all the time there. But the whole story actually of that statue, that it originally was the Nazi sculpture for the total victory of the Second World War, was not really present in the citizens, for the citizens in Göppingen. And what I actually wanted to do is also, I mean, like, I question also, like, what to do with this kind of sculptures. I mean, somehow they had such a strong history behind of it, which shows so much also the structures of power, and how it's still, you know, like surviving somehow in a visual way, and also how art is getting functionalized in, and it has such a interesting history behind it. So I decided actually to work on it or with it and build up a second sculpture, which is going to be an opponent to it. Yeah? So I used again actually this material, which was used for at the beginning to create or to make this sculpture invisible. I mean, like wooden crate, and I recreated it, let's say. So I began to create them, but not as a box. I took this the body forms of that original sculpture and built up a crate on it. So, and then it and I positioned it then it looked like that somehow, and then I positioned it just in front of it, so that they face each other. One, the crating of it, and the living sculpture. So the crate is only existing actually because of this statue, and also because of the story behind of it as a Nazi sculpture, which is still existing in that city. Yeah, so it looks like that now in the park. And I'm taking this as an example because I mean, till now it was my work. Somehow I reacted to it, I made kind of researches, and I built up a sculpture which also get in relation to it, and also questioning it maybe, or people are wondering why this is existing from the moment. I have also to say that during our work on that sculpture, it was quite a very open how to say, a violent approach of citizens who came up and thought that we are going to deconstruct the original sculpture. So we got in a lot of talks during that, and it was really very open that this was let's say, people love that sculpture, some of them, and also are politically very openly right. So they also don't hide it somehow. And actually, I was sure that after a week or even the day after, somebody will gonna burn this sculpture because it's by wood and it's criticizing it or getting an opponent of that sculpture. What I have also to say is on the right side actually is a gymnasium. I mean, like a kind of a school is existing, and even all the pupils during my work over there, they didn't know the story behind of that. They even didn't know that it was made by the Nazis, and that this aesthetics are obvious Nazi aesthetics, and they never had that in the school, or it was never a topic for the history teachers or German teachers or even the art teachers over there. So it became also a kind of a topic inside of the school, what was happening there, but also through the building and this existing and the opening, then through the Kunstverein, it became a little bit present, and it was in these little newspapers somehow written. But what after that happened was like the interesting thing. Oh, okay, I'm seeing that. So that's the most important thing, what came after, because then we talk now about mediation. I mean, one is the art and to make it, but then what kind of role is mediation is playing? So the Kunstverein, who invited me actually, they every weekend and sometimes even during the week, they were some of them were staying there and getting in contact with the citizens over there who were passing, and explained actually the story of that Nazi sculpture and why an artist made actually this one. So what happened actually is that a lot of communication with a lot of people from the city began. And at the end of the 6 months, it was so big, these discussions about we have to get rid of this Nazi sculpture. And some of them said like, no, we have, to deal with it. So that they asked me actually, can this sculpture stay? And then I said like, yes, it can stay, but it costs money. It's a sculpture and it costs money. Because I knew also the people love it and love the mediation between it. But if I give something free, then it doesn't have this worth. So what happened is that they began to make a kind of a civilian kind of active, they got active to get this founding of it, and through this trying to find that money, they went through the whole city to all the companies, but also to people on the streets, and some people gave €5, some people 500, some people hated it. So it became an even more discussion, and it came then that they got more or less 2/3 of the money. And then I asked them, yeah, Nasan, we didn't get the money, but 2/3 and the politics, because it was a conservative politics in the city, and they didn't want it. They didn't want to give the rest. And then I said, I'm sorry, then I'm going to deconstruct it. So you have to deal with it with your politician. And then it became very political, because then inside of politicians and the civilians, and it became a really big issue. So they fight it about it, and at the end they had to give the money because it was such a huge movement, became a movement, this sculpture, to let it stay. So at the end, I just want to say that art is one thing, and the second thing is also like how a mediation and how also the perception and also the activism of the civilians play a big role inside of this kind of topics. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm finished.
Thank you so much, Nasan. Now you can have to stop the screen sharing, and then we engage in the discussion again. Yes, perfect. So yeah, so there's a lot of overlaps. No, there's a lot of overlays. Both of your works are very, very personal. You are kind of present in both of your works, and through that, you make somehow the viewer very aware of their own position or assumption or opinions. I think that's a common denominator that I see in both of your works. And as I said before, you're making like literally things visible that were invisible, whether it's the sculpture or the speeches, who's actually saying what, and then kind of looking at these global realities and sharpening our view on them. So we have only 10 minutes left for this discussion, so it will be short and sexy. But three red threads that I see is the personal engagement. Both of your works are really dependent on the engagement of a public in many cases. So not in all of them, but many, it's inherent to your work that there's a public engaging with it. The other one is obviously humor. Both of you work a lot with the twinkle, you know, in the eye. There's a humor to it, and I believe that humor is a very powerful tool to get into like the really nitty-gritty topics. And thirdly is that you're both research-based. Both of your practices do sometimes have a very long-term kind of research going, you know, ahead of it before you even actually starting a project. So let's maybe really quickly start with the personal engagement. How do you go about this? How do you establish this type of trust with the communities that you're working in? Is there something that you've learned over the years, or do you just do it intuitively? And short and precise answers are wished for, so we can get these three answered in the next 10 minutes. Diana, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I mean, there is, you know, I have, it's sad that I didn't show it, but I have sort of a list of 10 questions that I ask myself whenever I'm making new work. And because for me, you know, like you mentioned before, it's very like, for me, a lot of my projects, the artists, the participation of the public is the piece is required in order for the piece to become an artwork. If that's not there, then it doesn't work. And it's not art yet. And so, you know, there are different, depending on whatever the project is, you know, if it's, you know, very community-based, like I'm supposed to build something with the community together, or if it's me sort of imposing a situation and building a situation, there's sort of different rules for those two types of things. I think when there's the one where I want to like bring a type of situation into space is to have very clear rules of participation that are very clear for everyone who comes, that they know that they can, these are the rules in which the things you need to do in order to participate, and to leave a lot of space for creativity from from the people who do participate. And then when it's community engaged is to then do the opposite, in which I work with the community to establish the rules of engagement, as opposed to imposing my own rule structure onto it. So I think those are two, you know, it's very important that depending on the kind of work that you're making, that you ask yourself like, okay, like what is the level of participation? What are the requirements of it? And what is the audience? What are the participants going to get out of this? And making sure that there is a direct answer to that. Because if there's not an answer, then it can kind of be, what's the word? Exploitative. So making sure that you don't push the line into exploitation. And yeah, that's my answer to that. The shortest answer I have to that.
Thanks, Diana. How about you, Nasan?
What was the question again?
The question was that both of your works often deal with an engagement of a public.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I mean,
personally to public? Is there
sometimes,
certain
I mean,
things
like,
that you've learned over your artistic practice?
I think my interests are in humans and in the society. I mean, like in the let's say in the society in general, how actually we function in it, and these structures also somehow steer us into some positions. And I want through from the inside of the system, I try to make some other structures maybe inside of the structure. So I'm really interested in the humans and in the people by itself, but it's not like that I'm always working with people together. But very often, because I'm a very open person, I'm really interested in the opinion of people and in the dialogue with people. So this is happening then in a natural way. So it's not so much planned. And then when I feel this makes totally sense and there is a need for it, I follow this also. So I just finished, finished, but the finishing is actually starting also a project in Osnabrück with a museum, where it started as a, let's say, a classic gallery exhibition inside of the museum as an invitation. And at the end, it was a kind of a super social experiment, and including people from the city, and re-question the institution and their staff and the structures inside of it, which became then a kind of a dynamic by itself. So it's always up to the project, I would say.
And I think I might have said it like this before, but both of you in your practices kind of come to a very fundamental question of how do we form an opinion, politically, speeches, etc., and how are we influenced also by external situations, conditions, etc. I think that kind of almost this question is always coming up when I'm looking at both of your works. So very, very short, 3 minutes left. Humor, super essential. Interesting enough, almost everyone that we picked here in these talks, there's humor. It can be very critical, it can be highly relevant topical issues, but humor plays a big role. 2 sentences, quick and sharp, on humor in your work.
Oh, be first. Okay. You know, I deal with very painful topics and things that are really, really hard to deal with and things that are hard to approach. And you know, we see it in comedy, and we see it in, you know, packing things in things that we can laugh at, or things that we can amuse ourselves with, is a great entrance point in getting to the points where we can truly discuss like what needs to change in order to improve society. Because I mean, look at us now, we're in a pandemic in all of our rooms, all alone, people are suffering, people are dying, it's a hard time. So why not find ways to talk about these hard things in a way that make them, it's not only about being palatable, but make them open, a little more open, so that the people that it's hard to approach these things can find an entrance point. And okay, so for me, that's important.
Thank you. Nasan.
Yeah, I think it's not about funny things. I mean, when we work with humor, it's about serious humor. I mean, it's, as you say, Diana, I mean, we deal with really like hard topics, and that we don't get totally depressed with it. So we try to, you know, like get also like the humor out of it, but without to forget actually what we are dealing about it. I mean, like I think that's very important, that it's not about fun, what we do. Yes, shortly, maybe.
So thank you. This is already our hour together is up. We're saying goodbye to the audience. We'll continue our little conversation here. But I would like to thank the both of you for joining us here. There's so much more to talk about. I would like to thank the audience for being with us now. I think it's the 10th time that we've been here on the Thursday evening. beautiful inspiration also about the power of art in that sense, no? Whether it's through kind of serious humor, but power has an enormous potential to actually also bring about change. So thank you all for being with us. This is the end for this year for the double feature lecture series. Goodbye and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.